Did you get a haircut?
Me?
Yes.
No, I just got a man bun.
Oh, okay.
Oh, neat. It looks like it's cut.
It does. Yeah, I got the sides cut whenever I have long hair because it's too hot. I sweat. So, okay. Sorry, I had to reset my computer to make my webcam work. Something's happening with my computer, but we'll be online shortly.
When are you leaving, John? For Hawaii, I mean.
I'm just printing out the agenda now, which I should have done from the beginning, and then we'll get started. One moment. Okay.
Morning, Ron.
Morning, gentle people.
Do we have everyone here? Oh, yes. Okay. Since not everyone's online. Okay, thank you, everyone. So we'll call to order at 10:01. And we will acknowledge that we're conducting our business today on principally the territories of the Hupatchisitt and the Tshot people, but also the Toronto territories figure in because we're doing quite a lot of work remotely. With that in mind, I would also note that this meeting is being broadcast to YouTube, and folks can either attend in person via becoming an attendee during this webinar Zoom meeting, or can watch online on YouTube. And so any questions or comments for this meeting can be sent to responses@icrd.bc.ca if need be, and we'll check them at the end of the day or at the end of the meeting. With that, we do have an agenda before us of several items. Are there any additions or modifications to the agenda, or shall we just pass it as, or put it forward as planned? Okay.
Make the motion to move the agenda.
Thank you, Director Shannon, and seconded by Director Roberts. Okay. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? All right, motion carried. Great. Okay, that brings us to petitions, delegations, and presentations. We have Ursula Banky, the project facilitator for Island Works Transition, in regards to the workforce strategy and the pandemic recovery plan. So I'd like to thank you for coming. I would remind everyone that presenters have about 10 minutes of content. If we come within 1 or 2 minutes of that time, then I'll just hold up 2 fingers or 1 finger. That's not me interrupting you. That's just letting you know how much time you have. If I interrupt you, I'll just talk. Once we hit about 10 minutes and it doesn't seem like you're close to the end, I'll hit pause and ask the board if we can continue. But I think the last time you were here, you were bang on money. So I think it's not really a concern. So once again, Ursula, please take it away and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Continuing the local labor market, West Coast Local Labor Market Information Project, we have renamed ourselves to align to a federal granting opportunity. So with that, we've named ourselves the West Coast Regional Business and Workforce Strategy Post-Pandemic Recovery, in response to, yes, the alignment to granting opportunity coming up shortly, but also to respond to the last presentation that I gave, I believe it was December 9th, regarding support. And that was where the directors requested, why not region as a whole? So here's an opportunity and we want to take advantage of it, but it's really quick turnaround with deadline March 4th. So that's why I'm here today to give a presentation and outlining, I guess the best thing I can do, you've got the letter sent to you just recently dated February 18th that outlines the project and its goals and objectives. Basically, the guiding vision is the national 2030 strategy of goal number 8, that's employment for all. So we are currently running into the workforce supply demand issues, all sectors. And we've developed a partnership, formal partnership with North Island College to be able to expedite the delivery. And they've come up with $1.3 million worth of programming to come into place. I've got all the supporting documents. I've given a presentation yesterday to District of Ucluelet. And I'm submitting a copy of the projected partnership contributions. So the last time I gave the presentation, December 9th, we were asking for a match of Tofino's contribution of $9,000. And so we stand with the same request, contribution of $9,000 to come into this project. The federal government strategic initiatives program, they are offering up to $2.5 million per year for a 3-year period. However, we won't qualify for that volume because we don't have the amount of 10% applicant equity that is required. However, if each of the jurisdictions provides $9,000 and we have Clayoquot Biosphere Trust a request, or we'll make a grant application for $5,000, that gives us up to $81,000. So that's a 10% cash equity going into the future of this program. And the program will last 3 years, and it plans to provide basically the goals and objectives, as you can see, address, the budget addresses the goals and objectives 1, 2, 3, and 4. So where Island Work Transition comes in, we hope to be able to build a structure that can live on beyond for program project continuity. Education, skills, and training, that's North Island College. Employers, we have letters from the Chambers of Commerce, Port Alberni, Tofino, and Ucluelet. And for workforce, we are attaching ourselves to the Nuu-Chah-Nulth Employment and Training Program. So this is how we can make this thing happen in response to your question, Isabella. So what I'd like to say is why government put in, why we're asking for government cash contribution is because we are proposing to address food security issues through the programs. We're proposing to address emergency response training. These are all things that are of interest to the region as a whole and individual communities. So I'm going to stop here and ask if you want me to continue. I can get into more details, but I think that the questions and answers will provide that.
carry on talking muted. If there's anything you'd like to go into more detail, you still have about another 5 minutes or so.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so the focus is the training, the education skills training, building capacity within the workforce to either upgrade or reskill or entry level type of training, short-term capacity building training. And so we've got North Island College as the key partner. Of course, all the governments that contribute are considered partners, and those that contribute in kind, which are the chambers and the nonprofits, they will also be considered as partners because they bring all the elements, the sustainable elements to a community. So we've got the programs that North Island College is offering is sustainable farming and market gardening, food processing and food product development, marine safety essentials, emergency response specialists, hydroponic gardening, digital literacy essentials, community entrepreneurial development for youth. That's 2 of those are focusing on youth, and forestry essential pathways, construction trades pathway, facilities maintenance for all the larger buildings, public buildings, digital marketing, that is all. So we're looking at a target demographic of 2 with a specific focus on youth at this point in time, and all the rest of them, it's all. So older worker, whatever is able to be inclusive. And that is for the 3-year curriculum, includes 3-year program, includes curriculum development. And these programs are proposing to address the food security issues by delivering them when you get participation and you build capacity between First Nations, non-Native, you have a good cross-section of capacity building programs. And so going on to other initiatives, they can grow and develop over the 3-year period because we go through a review. The advisory committee is what we're asking participation from the Port Alberni, from the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District at the advisory level, and the advisory level then reports to the Island Work Transitions, which is the lead proponent to the application. So I think I've covered it. Trying to be brief, but expansive at the same time.
I think that really does cover off the prospect well, and I'm glad that you left off with the advisory committee request. So I'll open it up for discussion. If anyone has any comments or questions, that would be now would be the time. Dr. Roberts, please go ahead.
Through the chair, yes. Thank you, Ursula, for that presentation. In your initial comments, you talked about applicant equity of 10%. And if the regional district goes along with this and matches Stefano's $9,000, is this an annual contribution or is it just a one-time contribution for this program?
I have structured the proposed partner, the projected partner contributions to be annual. So it'll be $9,000 a year for 3-year period. And then in the 3rd year for continuity, I expect that the advisory committee will then grow into a nonprofit, and the nonprofit then can acquire more funding, broader scope. And so that's the work of the advisory committee in the final 3rd year. Yes.
Thank you for that.
Any further comments or questions? Oh, there we go. Mr. Holmes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We feel a little confused at the staff level. Wendy and Ms. Bank had a fairly lengthy or a number of conversations on Monday. We understood that the ask was for a letter of support and participation in the committee only. I do note that our grant and aid deadline has passed. Thank you.
May I address?
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, these are some of the concerns that we did have our partner, the Tofino Chamber of Commerce, submit an application to grant and aid. However, because they are partner to the project, and the project is receiving $9,000 from Tofino, it ruled us out as the chamber bringing in equity to make the project work. So this was a problem as we were starting to negotiate around. And so the chamber, Tofino Long Beach Chamber of Commerce, had to withdraw their application because it was not going to work. So they withdrew it. And so this was now the next level of presentation. If the board is not willing to consider or able to consider contribution, then I apologize that I didn't include that into the letter, but I can provide my document that shows how I see this project play out. Whether we are a for-profit, and I understand the board is not able to contribute to for-profit. And so with that, we do have North Island College as a key partner. So I don't know if that is the way to go on this. I'm not sure. So I'm waiting for the board's direction on this.
Okay, thank you, Ursula. I have Wendy Thompson and then Dr. Shannon, I believe. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I did discuss with Ms. Banks that we cannot give assistance to a business. So if they cannot meet the not-for-profit criteria, I wouldn't recommend the board provide a grant.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Shannon, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch base on the just some more questions about the agriculture part of this and the economic, because you mentioned a program with North Island could be agriculture. Are you working with Port Alberni Shelter Society for that program that they're doing with?
Yes, sorry.
No, because that's my question, because I know that we did a grant and aid to the Shelter Society, and I'm just wondering if we're contributing grant and aids to these other pieces, if you will, as part of this program, perhaps that's how we can contribute to the nonprofit part of the other players involved. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, North Island College indicated that this is their, the programs are in response and in collaboration with their partners, and their partners are Nutella Employment Training, as well as the Shelter Society, and trying to address and also working with individual First Nations. They can answer best the details of their relationships with these organizations, but this is how they see a partnership with Island Work Transitions is going to work. So the coordination of all of these initiatives, an umbrella regional approach between workforce and business, that was what we saw as the potential to do region as a whole. The fact that we are for-profit, the project itself is entirely non-profit. So for it to shift to a key partner such as North Island College or other eligible parties, we're trying to figure out how to make this work.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like there may be some problem solving to occur. That being said, I'm wondering if there are any other conversations, any other comments? All right, Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, would a letter of support then be the next option that we could provide today?
Ursula, I think that's for you.
Oh, sorry. I was waiting for the chairperson to allow me to speak. Okay, so a letter of support, exploring ways and means of how we can participate in this project would be totally satisfactory. The name of the project is really important. So we do have a letter of support from the ACRD for the West Coast Local Labor Market Indicators Information Project, but we need it named according to this project. And I would suggest if we are able to keep the letter in such a way that the participation level is to explore ways and means that we can continue to participate. So not ruling out that, you know, how that could work, but including that into the effort. So then we can use that into our projections as to under development. I don't know if that's clear enough.
I think in that letter, it would make sense to provide a letter of support and to commit to some time to look into ways that the ACRD can support those efforts. But it probably needs to be clear enough that it can't directly support for-profit operations as well. Like, we don't need to say that, but the way that it's expressed needs to be kind of handled in that way.
I appreciate that.
As long as that's the understanding, that we can look into ways to help the project and that sort of thing, but not necessarily do it in the way that is initially thought of. I think that's kind of the way to do it. There may be opportunities arising later, especially with the province kind of having a hand in these kind of restarts, and planning especially. So I think what I'd like to see, I think, is maybe a suggestion from staff on what that letter may look like. But as long as we understand here what the intention is, then that should work. So if you correspond with the required language, and then we can clean it up and send it at that point. That's usually a part of how this works. So are there any other comments or questions? All right, seeing none, I'd like to thank you for making your presentation, and we will follow up as time goes by.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate everybody's willingness to make this work, and working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. All right, so that brings us to the next item, which is agenda item 4, which is a request for decision in regards to the communications coordinator and the purchasing coordinator things here. Oh, my apologies. Director McNabb, please go ahead.
So did we need to recommend a letter of support?
Yes, if that's something that we wanted to do, that would be the next step.
Okay, at this point?
I think we still need to recommend a letter of support, but then we do have time in between for staff to figure out what that might look like for presentation to the board. So yeah.
Okay.
Would you like to make that motion to provide a letter of support?
Yes, I would like to make the motion to provide a letter of support for the Island Works Transition Inc. And recognizing that direct financial support cannot be applied to this project, but certainly in principle, it looks like an awesome program. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Seconded by Director Bodner. Are there any other comments? Director Roberts and then Director Cole.
Just to confirm that the project is now called the West Coast Regional Business and Workforce Strategy Post-Pandemic Recovery Plan. I think that's where it should be addressed, or the letter should be addressed.
Yeah, I as long as we understand that part of the requirement for the letter is to be updated to whatever the appropriate name is, that should be covered off. I think we can rely on staff to provide the right language in that way. Okay, any further comments? Oh, sorry, Dr. Cole, did you have a comment? No? Oh, okay. Okay, with that in mind, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. All right, Now that brings us to item 4. So this is a request for decision regarding the proposed communications coordinator and purchasing coordinator. So I guess I'll just call on Douglas to maybe give an overview first, and then we'll lead into the recommendations and discussion. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The board previously resolved to include these 2 positions in the financial plan for discussion purposes, and so today is the report in the agenda, and our presence here is to support that conversation. The talking about the communications position first. There are a couple of files as the report talks about that I think were important and maybe somewhat pivotal in changing the board's view on what its aspirations might be with respect to engaging the public and with respect to communications, and the conversations in which we undertake in order to describe the services that are maybe upcoming, or often more importantly, to hear from the public to inform what those policies and services might be in the future. So really, this is the communications position is a question of service level. It's not really about sort of our website and about Twitter. Those are tools and maybe important tools, but it's really about identifying conversations that have purpose in relation to the board's public service objectives, and in guiding us through those conversations so that the board objectives are have the best information from the public, and that the information to the public is going out as well. Well, we did talk about risk on a number of these positions. I share the consultant's view that this isn't risk in the sense that there's people could get hurt or there'd be financial risk, but this is talk about reputational risk, and again, getting through those conversations in a way that is that people feel heard, and that the policy reflects the public's interests in these things as understood by the board. With respect to the procurement position, there's really 2 main thoughts. One is this position is really part of the capacity conversation that we had. And as you'll recall, we talked about and identified the way that we imagined to meet the workload that we have. It included relieving the significant time requirements for the procurement processes themselves from people who are otherwise expert in running landfills or water utilities, or in writing undertaking any number of services that we do. So we've got, I think, in the financial plan, approximately $10 million worth of capital procurement. Not all of that is that complicated. Some of it is quite simple and routine. Some of it, however, is more complicated, requires competitive processes, etc. And that takes us to our second point. The area of procurement law is a very active area of law, and our exposure to risk is significant. We're not really keeping up with the basics right now because we do have this distributed model with no expert on our staff complement. So if the board chooses not to pursue with this position, there's really two outcomes. One is we will have to take steps to meet an acceptable standard in procurement to make sure that we're not exposing the taxpayers to undue risk, and which will absorb time and capacity. But again, as mentioned, it has the second capacity implication in that we were putting this program together for the board's consideration and discussion to actually relieve existing people and those positions that are currently being recruited for the purposes of letting them focus on what they do well and what they're experienced and trained in, and then turn over the active procurement to someone who is expert and experienced and trained and maintains that current understanding of the state of the law and current trends in procurement. One of the board's strategic priorities is to delve into what has been called either social or strategic procurement. And this is something, again, that is a specific area of expertise that is being collectively developed. Again, that would take a good amount of time to do well to serve the board's objective in the strategic plan. And so this position would also lead that process. Mr. Chair, I think that's all I would like to say by way of introduction, and we are happy to answer the questions. Thank you.
So we have two sets of separate motions for each position. Let's start discussion now. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Dr. McNabb, please go ahead. And then Dr. Bodner.
So I've got comments and questions on both of these items. The dream of these two positions was at a strategy meeting that in September, when we anticipated that we were going to be turning a corner and that 2021 was going to be a year of expansion and return to business and all of that. It's pretty obvious that that's not going to happen right now. So I'm resistant to both of these because they're positions that we haven't previously had, and actually positions like, for instance, the purchasing agent, manager, whatever you want to call them. The city of Port Alberni doesn't even have one of those, so I'm not quite sure if Tofino or Hewlett have them. But my thinking was that in applying the extra position to the accounting, that we would be able to pick off this particular piece, the purchasing portion of it, in a better fashion, not completely alleviating it from where it is, but having an opportunity to apply some accounting time to it to better resource our purchases. The communications piece to me is really part of that vision of expansion and blowing our own horn and going forward. As I say, that's not really today's opportunity. I did see in the paper last night that the city of Port Alberni is looking for a temporary position for a person for this particular position. And I'm wondering if there is an opportunity to cooperate with the city of Port Alberni to perhaps share a person in this position. I can't see that there would be any substantial conflict of interest. We're both heading in the same direction at more or less the same pace. So I'd like to ask staff that question. So that's my 2 bits to the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have Dr. Bodner next. Do I have any other folks that I missed? Thank you, Dr. Roberts, Dr. Cole. So Dr. Bodner, please go ahead.
Thank you. Couple of questions I wanted to ask. First of all, is there such positions in other regional areas, and how do they cope with this type of problem? The other one is, could these, if these are both that important, could they not be half-time employment as opposed to full-time? And then and see how that works out. Those are my 2 questions. Oh, and the one for the communication coordinator, it said they could be excluded staff, and if so, that would be a difference of 10 or 15%. Who makes that decision as to whether they would be excluded or not if they were hired? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, so working backwards on the questions, the question of whether it's excluded depends on the job description, and so in answering that question, I'll sort of go back to one of Director McNabb's questions. Is we regularly and routinely go and talk to the city about resources to make sure that if there's ways that we can communicate that we do in fact cooperate, that we do cooperate. So the city, I feel uncomfortable sort of speaking on behalf of the city for the conversations that we've had, but certainly we've talked about both procurement and communications. The communications person that is being advertised right now is a full-time position for the city, and there's a mat leave And so that's to fill that mat leave. They had someone in that position who has gone on to something else, and so they're just trying to backfill that in the interim. So in talking to the city, we would develop sort of, are there any opportunities? And if there weren't any opportunities, then, and we were developing a job description on our own, then we talk about what do those positions include? And the labor code of British Columbia, the Labor Relations Code of British Columbia talks about whether somebody is included in the union or not included in the union. And there's really two types of tests. If they are a manager, they effectively hire and fire people, that kind of thing, and direct people like that, then it's not appropriate for them to be in the union. Secondly, if they are close to sort of the executive decision-making, et cetera, which is a longer conversation, but use that as a shorthand, then that's another reason they may or may not be in the union as well. So we really have to get down to the job description and then say, does this position belong in the union or does it not? In terms of whether the city has I mean, I think Director Minions or Director Paulson would be able to speak about the full-timeness of that communications person. With respect to procurement, I know that the city is, at the staff level, is contemplating how best to do that. And again, it'd be inappropriate for me to share that conversations. That's something that if Director Minions, Director Paulson know anything about, perhaps they feel comfortable doing that. But speaking about the question about, have I seen it other places? Absolutely, I've seen it other places. So at the Sunshine Coast Regional District, where I was the CEO, we had a purchasing coordinator. Other local governments, there's been complete departments. So it really just depends on the model. The challenges about a distributed model is that everybody has to know something about it. And so that means everybody's got to maintain a level of knowledge about tender law and about what's the difference between a tender and a request for proposal and all of these types of things. So that's the challenge with it. And so either model can conceivably work, but generally speaking, if you're in a smaller organization, then obviously you wouldn't have a separate position for that. We are a small organization, except that we do a fair bit of procurement. As I mentioned, we've got $10 million worth of capital alone to procure this year, and not all of that is really, really complicated, but some of it is. And we combine that with the management of the agreements and leases, et cetera, and so that we've got somebody who's actually watching those things. So we've come to you a number of times saying, look, we're coming to the end of this agreement, and we really need to extend it while we work on the procurement end of this part. Well, we're trying to alleviate that so that we've got somebody monitoring these things and who actually sort of owns the responsibility for that. So I think I hope I've covered the questions, Mr. Chair.
I think what I'd like to do is jump right to Director Minions, and then we'll go back for follow-up for Director McNabb.
Sure, thank you. I don't have a lot to add to the procurement side. I don't feel like I have, internal enough knowledge of the operations of the city to speak to that side of it. But I do want to just speak to the communications piece. And, in my time on council, we went from having no communications position to trying to put sort of like a 25 to 50% of our deputy clerk at the time into communications. As we started to see the need growing, we saw that not be enough. We went to a full-time communications manager. Now our communications manager is on maternity leave. So we've had a fantastic interim who now unfortunately is leaving us also. And I just want to say that through seeing, the challenges of losing that position over time in some of the staff changes, you really see how full-time of a position it is. So I would not suggest trying to share that position in any way. And I want to just speak in strong support of that communications role. And I'm sorry, my computer died partway through this. So I did miss a little bit of the conversation, but happy to answer if anyone has any questions of me specifically.
Director McNabb, I was going to jump to you, but then I realized it was actually Director Bodner's question. So I've added you to the list, but next up we have Director Roberts and then Director Cole.
Through the chair to Mr. Holmes and the rest, I want to speak in favor of both of these recommendations. Firstly, communications. I have been a strong proponent of having a communications coordinator. I think the while corner of the desk type stuff goes on, and not to dismiss any of the professional type communications that have occurred with our staff or from our staff, I think is very important. However, I think that if we had a communications coordinator, it would relieve a lot of time and effort that staff is currently putting into communications through a skilled professional, which I think would really help in our conversations with community and community groups and actually other news agencies as well. That if it comes from one source, I think that is truly important. That it lends itself to the professionalism of communications in general. And as the consultant says, that the current model presents some risk from potential incorrect messaging. However, the greatest risk is from reputational damage. So I think that that this is a key, and I'm hearing it from different people out in the community, that if we have one central communicator, it really bodes well for the regional district. As far as the proposed purchasing coordinator, and I appreciate Mr. Holmes's comments that our staff procure goods and services in excess of $10 million annually. It's really important to have somebody that knows purchasing law and that is able to work again with staff. If staff through committee or from the directors says that we need this or we need that to have a professional person in that position to in fact lead that again relieves time from staff trying to do multiple jobs. And I think that the comment from the consultant was that in time tendering contract administration, lease management, and partnership agreements, which now contract administration from lends itself more to having a professional in there, and not to undermine or lessen the professional conduct that now occurs with Mr. Holmes leading all these contracts and so on and so forth. I think that it, and I appreciate the consultant's comments, that this represents a baseline business case that would in fact render the position as cost neutral over time. So that's my rationale for supporting both of these, and thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you, Director Roberts. I have Director Cole and then Director McNabb, and then I have something to say. Director Shannon, I see you there. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that just like having the right tools for the job, I'm a firm believer that the right knowledge, the right education, the right person in the right position to do the right job is always the best course of action. But I do, with Director McNabb, as far as timing wise goes, and sort of the nobody having a crystal ball and not being able to see how things are going to be moving forward and whose positions will be taxed more and who isn't currently maxed out, and of course we don't want things falling off the side of the desk. So I don't know what the right answer is, but that's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for that. I have Director McNabb next.
So in a meeting about a year ago, staff requested that the purchasing information not be forwarded to the board to be considered. Now, on this board at this particular time, we've got at least 3 individuals that have had significant lifetime purchasing experience. And so what's happened there is that the board was able to take some of the weight of the decision and some of the scrutiny of the decision off the staff that were producing the recommendation. At this point in time, we're not. So as I said before, when I was moving for us to approve the extra staff person in accounting, this was my thinking that that person would have some available time to take this other portion of weight off of our staff management, thinking that those staff managers and some of the individual, even hourly people, have got significant purchasing approval, pre-approval. And so I think it would be a stepping stone sort of thing to put this purchasing piece as part of the accounting file and to work it into a position where it may become full-time over a period of time as we remove the ability for staff to be doing their own purchasing, including fire departments. Right now, the fire departments do all of their scrutiny, all of their purchasing under their own umbrella. And, down the road, we could be looking at that and providing efficiency by volume. So I'd like to move forward with this in a cautious, business-like manner, not going from something we haven't had for 50 years into a full-time position that we really don't 100% need because we're functioning without it. So that's my thinking. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So I have myself and then Dr. Shannon and then Dr. Minions. So, and Dr. Beckett and Dr. Cote. Thank you. Okay, so I'll try to be quick. This is reminding me of the conversations we had leading up to strategic planning. And one of the central aspects of our strategic plan, our recovery actually from COVID, is moving forward quickly on the idea of strategic or social procurement. That is a really good idea because that allows us to make decisions in an ordered way to help support the local government or local suppliers as much as possible. The problem that presents, though, is that is a change in how we would normally procure things. And therefore that presents some difficulties in making sure that procurement process is done in a way that fits with the requirements under provincial law in regards to all the things that we've already talked about with tender, RFP, so on and so forth. But how do we actually manage that transition from just how it is now to being more pointed in understanding of how we decide where we and who from we procure goods and services. And I think that presents a strong argument for having a purchasing coordinator of some sort. I think that is one of the most important things that we can see that will avoid creating more costs through having the distributed model of everyone trying to handle it and specializing it. Whenever you specialize anything, it tends to decrease costs rather than increase them. That's true on the lines. That's true in harvesting. That's true in the office. A specialized position almost always produces more value than trying to rely on everyone doing it. I'll touch on briefly procurement experience on a board level is somewhat different and makes me uncomfortable because the board shouldn't be horning in on administrative duty. I may have to cross Dr. Minions off that list because I think that's the point she was going to make. That being said, I don't think that our ability to do something twice a month or maybe 3 times a month is the same as having somebody who's making sure that Jenny or Mike, although I don't think Mike really makes very many acquisitions, or other folks procure their services and goods in a way that fits with both the policies that we want as a board and the province requires as a whole. I think a communications coordinator makes a lot of sense. And I think one need only look at the quality of communication that is coming out of the city of Fort Alberni, as opposed to even just a few days previous. And I say this with complete, like, no judgment in a self-aggrandizing kind of way. But in the past couple of years, I've learned more about what Port Alberni is doing just by reading Facebook than I have necessarily by reading a 400-word article in a newspaper. So I think it's very important for governments to understand that we are suppliers of copy, because news doesn't report anything that happens except for the limited time that they have to cover our beat. So we have to provide for them the information in context and in the way that we want, so that our citizens understand what we're doing and the reasons why we do it. Huu-ay-aht, a comparatively tiny organization, has 2, and we're contemplating adding a 3rd communications person. And this is to avoid the extra costs that we've incurred by hiring contractors to do the work that exists for us outside of what our staff do already. I think communications as an aspect is something that will be very beneficial for the organization to have. So I'm supportive of that. And I do understand that it is new, but it's not so new that it doesn't exist in other places. But I'll stop talking now, and that'll bring us to Director Shannon and then Director Minions.
Thank you. I just want to point out that our strategic plan, I mean, I've been grappling with this because in January we approved other positions that are in the financial plan. And when we come down to, we'd like to do everything, but when we're looking at what our tax requisition is going to be, I'm really hesitant to include this for 2021, not diminishing the importance of the positions, but I think I mentioned it before when we talked about it in January, the perception of all this hiring while we're going through a pandemic and where the money's going to come from. I know we've got tax requisitions. If this ends up going forward at the dates presented on the agenda, I really think we're going to have to take a hard look at mitigation options for tax requisition to try and help constituents to keep increases down as much as we can. Even if we looked at, because our strategic plan is until 2024, even if we looked at changing dates to put it into a next tax year or something, just to look at those options. Because as I said, I'm not opposed to these. I'm just trying to be really aware of the amount of positions we're adding in a year where a lot of people aren't working and are relying on things. And I feel as a local government, the best way that we can help is to, I mean, yes, there's value in these things and people need to know what's going on. I just struggle with the amount that we're adding with the tax requisition and how that's going to affect people. And if we can postpone something to help with that, I think that that's the approach that I would rather take. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to Director Minions and then Director Beckett.
Thank you. You covered my comments well, so I will just let the other speakers go next.
Okay, I have Director Beckett and then Director Cote. I did miss you, sorry.
Thank you very much. Great discussion and dialogue. From my perspective, the timing is difficult and challenging for us. We don't have a crystal ball. I do believe strongly that we need to be in a position, post-pandemic, to have the resources in place for the best possible chance of recovery. I think it's really critical, and these 2 positions would complement that. The one thing that I feel is missing in looking at the description of these two positions, and whether it was intentional or not, but I would feel a whole lot better and get a lot more excited about the two positions if grant writing was incorporated into some form of function or responsibility, and the two positions might actually be able to speak to that, because again, I think that currently we're struggling by having someone do it off the side of their desk, and we have so many needs that could be satisfied by that. So I'm in support of these positions. Timing is an issue. I want to make sure we're ready to go when we are post. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beckett. I'm going to go right to Douglas because I think there's an answer to one of those questions. And then I did see you, Director Bodner. We'll put you on after Director Cote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just by way of reminder, the board has approved a position that has 3 areas of responsibility of it. Risk management, so dealing with the policies to and relating risk management, including the management of insurance policies, et cetera, and the periodic reviews we do in partnership with the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia to make sure that we're limiting the risks to the public and to the taxpayers through exposure, and grant management and asset management. So that position, there's a position that is slated to start the 1st of May to deal with a blend of those 3 areas. Thank you. Director Beckett is quite right. We are awash right now in grants and grant opportunities. Yeah, it's quite something to keep up with. Thank you.
Yeah, we are in the same position at Houlier. I am wondering, I can't remember the name of that position. Douglas, do you know what it is? It has a
asset grant and risk management coordinator.
Okay.
I think a version of that.
Okay, that's fine. That brings us to Dr. Cote and then Dr. Bodner.
Thank you. I have a whole bunch of questions and inquiries. So with the fire departments, I thought that we hired Charlie Sterrett to actually help to assist with fire departments in coordinating, and I was assuming then that would help well with purchasing within the fire departments and communication between them. So I'm just trying to understand how this will affect Sproat Lake area in having these 2 positions filled. And it's not that I don't understand that there is value in them. It's just how will that affect my community right now with cost versus savings, and wondering if we spent some money and provided staffing, our employees some training in the interim so that we can address the needs that are being identified here. Just with purchasing. So I also thought about our purchasing. So we've identified that there's some big purchases coming, but we also have limited contractors and suppliers. Example, water infrastructure, like where do we get the pipes? Like it's all local mostly. So I'm not sure that we need to go beyond our local knowledge and supply, where we've already made great connections, and I don't think that we're being taken advantage of in that area. As far as grants go, there is a lot of grants out there, and love to see us go for that. But once we get this money, do we actually have the staff to commit to actions when we receive these grants? Because I have seen us receive grants years ago where we received a grant and never got to utilize it because no staff to take on the job. So there's a lot of consideration here. And I'm not sure if right now is the time, as other directors have identified, their hold back as to committing to these positions. But I'm wondering at that point, then, is there an option for employee training? Thank you.
Mr. Holmes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, if using procurement as the focus for that question, the question is, do we want to train 4 people or 1 person? Is really what it comes down to. So we will. So we will have 4 people who, to one degree or another, not exactly dabble in procurement, but do it sort of off the corner of their desk. And so we'd have to be. We were talking about sort of spreading the training around to a number of people versus have one person who is expert in this and whose part of their professional responsibilities to make sure that they understand the current trends and the evolution that takes place through the different types of procurement that we do. So that sort of is the answer to all of that. The grants question is, do we have the staff for it? That's an excellent point. I think protective services is a very good example where it's been 1 year now since we've had a protective services person in place. Prior to that, we had a number of false stops and starts. And so, no, we didn't. We weren't able to spend that money, but now we've had somebody in place. Now, Heather has been very preoccupied with the deluge of information that comes via COVID and processing that information and making sure that this organization is responding to it and supporting the city in their response to that, because, of course, this is a partnership for protective services in the Alberni Valley between the city and the ACRD. And so she hasn't been able to turn her mind completely to protective services and the grants that we do have. But we're actually making grounds in using that money. The community alert system is a perfect example. We were successful in getting a grant and we sent the money back in 2019 at the end of the year because we said we didn't spend it. Can we keep it and spend it next year? They said, no, there's a time limit. So we sent the money back. Fortunately, we got a grant, not for the application itself for Voyant Alert, but actually for the promotion of that. So we did get, I think it was $8,000 towards the awareness campaign, et cetera. So no, that's a real challenge. So getting these people in place in order to spend the money is exactly right. The effect on Sprout Lake, these 2 positions are in the financial plan for discussion purposes to start September 1st. So the effect on Sprout Lake can be seen in the financial plan currently. And every other jurisdiction, of course, for that. With respect to Charlie's position as the fire services manager, that position has actually existed since before my time. Before I got here, there's a 0.4 full-time equivalent contract for supporting the fire departments and a 0.4 full-time equivalent contract for protective services. So we had, in that 2 times 0.4 equals 0.8, we actually had 1 person doing both contracts. So we've only upped the resources dedicated towards supporting the fire departments a little bit, but we have changed the focus to doing exactly the things that Director Cote has asked about in terms of trying to get some cohesion in things like training and timing of procurement, et cetera. That does not make Charlie a specialist in procurement. And for the larger pieces in the fire departments, there's a number of who actually do get involved in, of course, in addition to the fire chief and his or her executive and in procurement. But that's not the same as somebody whose full-time job is to procure. Yeah, I think I covered those questions. If not, please let me know. Thank you.
Yes, so that brings us to, I believe, Director Bodner next. I'm worried that I missed someone, though. Is there anyone else? Thank you, Director Paulson. And then I think we'll hit pause at that point. Please go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. It seems to be, in my opinion, though, what we've been hearing from the staff is, look, we're in a crisis situation. We cannot handle this and we need some help. And this is what they have come up with. So I think it's important that we do listen to what they're saying. As far as training goes, they don't have time for what they're doing, never mind doing more training. And is it going to be end up with what we actually need? It's almost like a bleed that's of an artery. Do we let it bleed, or do we say, well, we'll call for help first? I'm still quite in favor of having both positions. Thank you.
Okay, and that brings us to Director Paulson.
Just a couple of comments, in particular with the purchasing coordinator position, and we're seeing in government, at least, those positions changing significantly, and most municipal and local governments, the process may not have arrived at the goal in developing social procurement policy. And social procurement policy allows you a little more leeway where you may be receiving responses to RFPs, and you may not necessarily be going with the low bidder. And it gives you guidelines on how to decide which provider gives the most benefit to the community. And anybody in this position, I think, needs to be really conversant with social procurement. Us old guys, we used to just sit in our office and we had a purchase order book in our top right-hand drawer. Well, legally and benefit-wise, that's changed significantly. And I wish that our MLA, Josie Osborne, was still as a director, because I know she was one of the champions for social procurement. And it's a little more specialized than it used to be. Let's put it that way. And addressing, I realize this is a recommendation from a committee of the whole to go to budget for further discussion, but we wouldn't have a full tax requisition for either one of these positions this year. I wouldn't see that we would have shoes on the floor until the fall for either one of these positions. Once you go through the budget process and the hiring process, and your full impact of both of these positions wouldn't be until 2022. I just thought I'd bring that up. You talk about timing. We don't have a crystal ball, but I would hope that by the time we get to September, that we're on that uphill climb coming out of this business. And anyway, those are just some of my thoughts. The communications position, maybe there's a little bit of confusion on what that position actually entails. And perhaps Mayor Minions and I might be able to come back to this group with a bit more of a job description, a little more delineated, and so that people fully understand that position is not just posting to Facebook. It's creating communications, press releases, just so many more things there. And, that's an area where at the city, at least, we've seen the contributions in that position. And the purchasing coordinator, a good example is the high school. The high school was built, and basically part of the contract was, okay, well, if you build the high school, what can you do for us? And the actual proponent, and this is part of social procurement, the proponent that got it says, we'll build it, but at no extra cost on the contract, we'll put in your artificial turf field in the position. So that's kind of what social procurement's about. It's if you get the contract, what do you bring to the community that provides social advancement in the community? And anyway, thanks for your indulgence. And I just thought I'd throw some thoughts out there. I like the good old days where I had a purchase order book in my top drawer, but apparently that's gone by the wayside.
Thank you, Dr. Paulson. I have Dr. Shannon next, and I think that's it. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on a comment from Director Paulson. In regards to these positions in tax requisition for this year and versus next year, there will be a requisition at some point, and I think in 2021 we are including other positions. And as I've got a marketing degree. I fully comprehend what a communications coordinator is going to do. But I mean, we're also looking at elections next year. So we're looking at extra costs for running elections. And so I would rather see these positions be, again, our strategic plan is not everything needs to be done in 2021. I would rather see these pushed to next year to maybe feel that those costs where we're going from the receiving from the taxpayers into 2022, 2023 to try and spread this out a little bit. Again, not diminishing the importance of these positions, but I'm just very aware of where we are right now and what we're going to be asking from the taxpayers. And to be perfectly honest, I want to try and keep as low of an increase as possible to my community. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Paulson, quickly.
Just a quick comment there, and I agree with you, Director Shannon. When you get to September, how big a difference would it be for us to put that off till January 1st, so it becomes a 2022 complete thing? I mean, what do we got? September, October, November, December. There's 4 months of the year. It's just something to consider, and we're going through the same thing with budget in the city right now. How do we keep this thing in COVID times affordable and reasonable and intelligent?
Okay. Douglas, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just food for thought. Clearly, this conversation understands that the financial plan contains both of these starting September 1st. If you're talking about a deferral, I would like to reiterate one particular point with respect to our conversations that have been going on for a little bit more than a year now about matching the workload with staff resources. I would like to differentiate these two positions in that we look at the purchasing coordinator very much as a resource matching workload position, and we look at the communications position as an increased service level position. And so that's sort of how we've looked at it in trying to create a world that we think that we can meet the service requirements that we understand the board wants, including in respect of the strategic plan. So if you're talking about deferring, I guess my contribution at this particular juncture to the conversation would be to consider deferring the communications manager to sometime into 2022 versus the purchasing coordinator, just because of the difference between trying to meet existing workload versus trying to enhance the service level. This entire conversation and the entire service level belongs to the board. So I'm not trying to tell you what I think is more important. I just wanted to make sure that you understand from staff's point of view, the difference between these two positions as we understand them. Thank you.
I think on behalf of the board that's well understood, especially in the report. I think there is a differentiation between the purchasing coordinator and the communications coordinator. And so I'm glad that they're separated out in the motions. I would suggest then that maybe we have a conversation now that's leading to a motion in regards to the purchasing coordinator and then the communications one. We could do it in any order, of course. It's up to the board and how they move things. It's just, I think if we're looking for that sort of kind of elections-based consideration, then that might be the way to do it for the signaling, because I do think that, especially in the purchasing aspect, because we already have a grant writer that's doing the asset management and risk management, that's creating value. That's the same kind of, that's in the same boat. I do see the purchasing coordinator as someone who is actually going to save us money and avoid extra costs in the future, which is slightly different. So with that in mind, I think the way ahead is to maybe move and recommend the purchasing coordinator and then talk about what a deferral of communications might look like, even if that's necessary. Director Beckett?
I would make the motion that the Committee of the Whole recommend to the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors that it approves the full-time position of purchasing coordinator at an estimated annual cost of $98,000, including benefits, to commence September 1st, 2021.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Roberts. Okay, any comments? Director McNabb.
Just a point of information here. So are weighted votes considered on this committee of the whole? No. Okay.
No,
Appreciate
not
it.
on the
Thank you.
committee level. No. Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in. Oh, Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
This is just a recommendation to the board, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a. Yeah. Any further comments? Okay. Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, and now the issue of the communications coordinator. What is the will of the board? So it seems like there's kind of three options. Director Roberts, go ahead.
Yeah, I consider that position to be extremely important as well. And I understand Mr. Holmes's comment about putting it over of the two. I would like to make the recommendation that the committee of the whole recommend to the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors that it approve the full-time position of Communications Director at an estimated annual cost of $99,000, including benefits, to commence September 1st, 2021. Again, this is a recommendation.
Okay. And do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Johnson. Any further comments? I would note that Director Roberts said director, but I think he meant coordinator. I did see, I think, Director Paulson, did you have your hand up? Oh, sorry, Director Cote. And then Director McNabb.
Thank you. Could we consider this to be a part-time position with, as was identified earlier, about grant writing?
Douglas, do you want to, we already have a grant writer. Douglas, did you have a?
Mr. Chair, it's a tricky thing. The chances of finding somebody who's proficient and trained and experienced in communications who wants to come and work part-time, my guess is that would be somebody who either already has a part-time position and looking to fill the rest of their time, or else there's someone who's retired and says, well, I don't want to completely down tools, but I'd like to but I would like to still do, make some contribution professionally. So, we would pursue whatever the board wants to look at. Our expectation is something like this would be, there'd be two things. It's from a recruitment point of view, I think it would be difficult for the reasons I've just mentioned. And then from a higher service level point of view, to really integrate the person into to engage the community in the conversations that I think the board wants to do, from hearing the conversations in the strategic plan. Remember hearing comments about ACR who? Yeah, something like that is my recollection. I don't think that's a part-time job. I believe that is very much a full-time job is what I think I believe about that. So that's what I would say about that, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, talking while I'm muted again. I have Dr. McNabb next.
So right at this particular point in time, Beaver Creek's rise in taxation is 4.86%. That's not, I don't want it to be 4.86%. I want it to be like 1 or 1.5%. And, the deferral of this to January, it makes perfect sense in this environment. They only got one taxpayer. They're burdened with all kinds of other stuff, and we've loaded on enough new staff. We've got adjustment to make, even by putting these staff in place to make them effective and to understand where they fit in the mosaic and how they work together is going to be enough work. And this position needs to go into 2022. There's no question in my mind about it. Yes, it could be beneficial in 2021, but we can't afford it. And so, you know, I mean, I'd really like a new Corvette, but I got a 2006 Corvette and I'm going to live with that. And that's what this is about. So, you know, it's just, we can't spend it. Thanks.
Okay. With that in mind, are there any further comments? Dr. Beckett?
Thank you. I'm supportive in deferring this to January and making that commitment so that the organization knows it can gear up for the recruiting process and for the post-pandemic excitement. Thank you.
Before we go to Director Roberts then, are you willing to put forward a motion to modify the original motion to change September to January of 2022? Because I think that's the process by which you would defer it. Is that, yeah, that's exactly what Director Roberts was going to say, I guess. Is that okay, Director Beckett? You would so move to do so?
I would, thank you.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Minions. Sorry, Director Roberts. Dr. Minions got there first. Okay, so with that in mind, this is now about the amending motion to change September 1st to January 1st, 2022. So the September is 2021. Dr. Shannon, please go ahead.
Thank you. Question to staff on timing for pushing this into 2022, because a timeline I kind of had in my mind, if we were going to defer, would be like summer 2022. So it's a half of a year of wages versus a full year in 2022, and then to kind of tie that over into the next one. If maybe Doug, you could speak to that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, for exactly the reasons that Director McNabb said, it is a pile of work to recruit and onboard and for higher levels of service, then you're cooperatively developing with the subject matter expert something new. So the deferral is not. It's really all about the board's discussion about when it wants to bring that new resource on from our perspective. So January 1st is easier from a workload point of view than is September 1st. June 1st or some other time in 2022 as well. What I would be mindful of is the election's a fair bit of work, and the position that deals with the election is quite closely connected with this as well, the way we think that this will develop on our staff team. And so I would be the lump of election work. This is almost takes Wendy's commentary if she's prepared to do so. There's a lump of work that happens early in 2022 tied to the election, and then it's a little quieter, and then there's a lot of work towards the end. So I don't know if sometime in the summer threads the needle, but Wendy, perhaps you could comment on that.
Yeah, usually at the start of the year, it's just more looking at our bylaws and any new election legislation. Gets quite busy actually in the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly,
yeah. Dr. Shannon,
spring, summer.
Before I get to you, I'm hoping to, Dr. Beckett had a comment, so.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that, we all hope and pray that things change, and I think they will. And I think, again, without that crystal ball, I anticipate things are really going to be happening. And to hit the road running in 2022, a communications person will help early in the year as opposed to, waiting the 6 months. Although I recognize, Director Shannon, you're trying to save some money that way. Again, I think front loading it and getting us in a position to, for that economic recovery is important.
Okay. Thank you. Director Shannon, and then.
Thank you. Just with Wendy's comments, I was going to say because I know that we've got a new position we're hiring for January 1st, 2022, that I can't remember what it was, but I know there's one January 1st. With after Wendy's comments, if March 1st or something like that would be appropriate. If not, then yeah, I'll just leave my comments at that.
I think January 1st position is one on the West Coast with respect to solid waste coordination. Yeah. So I would defer to Wendy about March 1st. It seems to me that despite what I was thinking, that sounds better than the summer.
Yeah, I wouldn't want it much later than that because there's onboarding. So when elections get busy, that person I would hope would be right up to speed and ready to hit the ground running.
January, February, March. Okay. I'm just realizing
Probably,
that
mid-spring, summers when it starts to ramp up for elections.
okay. Dr. McNabb.
So we might not
sorry.
want them.
Sorry. I'm adding you to the list. I have Dr. McNabb.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I think we could spend all day here getting bogged down in the details of do we want it to be February, March, January, September, June? And I feel like that's really not our role as a board. Are we supportive of this project or of this position? Are we committed to hiring it next year? I think it's reasonable for us to say if, largely we expect it to be a full year position or a half year, but I don't think we need to get into the details of exactly what day this person is going to be hired. And I would just say that I am very supportive of pushing this to next year. So I'm supportive of the amendment to the motion. I think Director McNabb has made some great comments around, needing to stagger and being realistic about what we can afford. I'm happy to see that the board is I think, wholeheartedly pretty supportive and understanding that this position is needed. But I do think we have to be reasonable in how much we can do, how fast, given the financial position that we're in. So I'm supportive of the amendment and the main motion as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. McNabb.
Just that we might not want them to hit the ground running. We've already had enough staff run.
It's because we didn't have enough running. Okay, so that brings us to potentially just voting on the amendment as it's been presented. And so this is changing it to the January date. So I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. So that brings us to the main motion now, which should read, instead of September 1st, 2021, we now will have January 1st, 2022. Okay, with that in mind, I think I'll just forego comments because we've already talked it out. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, so that brings us to the end of that conversation. I don't know that there's any follow-up, so I think that brings us directly to item B, which is the request for decision on the allocation of the Restart grant. And I think this is a Terry. Yeah, this is a Terry one. So please
yes.
go ahead.
Hello. Sure. So the January 13th Board of Directors meeting, we discussed the allocation of the Restart grant. And at that time, there was some discussion about wanting to put some funding aside for the illegal camping issues, in particular out on the West Coast. Staff have thought about it and think that $10,000 would be adequate. So this recommendation is to put $1,000 towards that initiative. We would run that funding through rural planning. And then from a regional parks perspective, that amount would be reduced from our original recommendation of $27,600 to $17,600. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I have Dr. McNabb.
Director Bodnar actually was before me.
Oh, my apologies, Director Bodnar. Okay, please go ahead. I think she wanted you to go first, John.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I really got a problem with this. The allocation of this fund really got screwed up on our desk. The Beaver Creek, 3,000 people, ended up with, if you consider everything, about $40,000. you know, based on what the municipalities got, $3.5 million for the city of Port Alberni, and if you extract that in any way back to try to balance any of this, it doesn't make fiscal sense at all. And to be taking the rest of this money, Cherry Creek virtually got nothing. You know, they got about $10,000 in budget consideration, which now is being tampered by taking the extra money off for the regional parks. So in my mind, Cherry Creek should be getting this money. And I don't know why they didn't get included in the fire department equipment. I don't know that they don't need it or whatever, but you know, just because they're an improvement district, I don't think that should exclude them. I mean, some of these other functions that we're putting it towards are pretty vague and gray anyhow, but Cherry Creek is a regional district and it didn't get any benefit. And, you know, this was a discussion in our rural directors UBCM meeting about this allocation and how it was all done. I don't mind that the city of Port Alberni got 3.5 million because they've got roads, they've got infrastructure, they've got sports facilities and all of that sort of thing. Yes, but the money that was supposed to come to us didn't, and you know, this is compounding that. And if we put $10,000 into getting the campers off of Kennedy Lake or wherever the heck they are, all they're going to do is come to Boot Lagoon. That's not going to solve the problem. The problem isn't moving them. It's finding something else, someplace constructive for them to actually be. 10 grand ain't going to do it. But I mean, I really am 100% thinking that all of this money should go to Cherry Creek, even though Beaver Creek would really like it.
Thank you. I think I saw Director Cote raise her hand, but maybe you're just moving your hand around. Did you want to speak, Director Cote?
Not really. We've already discussed
Sorry.
a lot of this, so that's opening it right up again. So.
Okay, thank you. Director Cole?
So initially I had a question as to what rationale or where that particular dollar sign came from and sort of the math behind that or whatever. But then secondly, then I thought for sure most of the problem that we're having on West Main aren't going to end up at Boot Lagoon because there's no surf there, but that's another thing. And there are, I don't know, there's 2 million people come a year to the West Coast. And I feel as though we need to protect, I mean, it behooves everybody as they travel here along their way to get here because the vast majority of them do not fly in. They make their way through Port Alberni and all the regional district in between to get to the West Coast. And 2 million is now supposedly a conservative number. I feel as we do need to protect, that funds do need to be allocated to the protection of, even if you just take the environment as part of the problem that comes with this whole back roads and side road camping problem that we're having on the West Coast. I got lots more words, but they're not organized right now, so I'll just leave it at that.
I do think that the $10,000 is actually set aside for the creation of a strategy or report. So this will hopefully answer a lot of the questions that we may have or that may be begged in further discussion. So I think there's that. Were there any other comments? Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. Later in today's agenda, there is a resolution going to AVICC regarding support from the province and some kind of help with the illegal camping. The illegal camping is not just in Area C, Long Beach. It's in other areas. And like within the city of Port Alberni, it's a problem everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we will get some kind of response from the province in assistance in how to deal with this. And, you know, it's not limited to just our area either. So this is a Canada-wide issue. I'm not opposed to having money set aside for mitigation efforts for illegal camping, but not just for Area C. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get to Director Roberts and Bodner, I saw that Douglas had turned his camera on. So do you have a information there?
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if I need to speak to this a little bit. We started our conversation last fall at the West Coast Committee because we really wanted to use that as a bit of a just focus in on the issues that were happening there, recognizing that it's affecting the entire region. And I think that I need to take some responsibility for not catching this. And you know, for example, our conversation next week is about the entire region, and we're inviting stakeholders to the committee, the whole from both the Alberni Valley and the West Coast, the forest companies and provincial ministries, and we'll be there to speak about issues in the entire region. So so I think you commented earlier on that really this isn't an awful lot of money. So it's not like we can develop a bylaw and hire a bylaw enforcement officer to go do something here. This is really about, you know, about creating a strategy. And I don't believe that the intention would be to narrow the strategy there. So I apologize for that narrow wording, because I do believe it's about the issue as opposed to the specific geography in Area C. Thank you.
Okay. I have Director Roberts and then Director Bodner.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thanks, Mr. Holmes, for those comments. You basically took the words out of my mouth. I appreciate Director Cote's comments about it's not just, you know, these comments and the discussions next week are going to be involving multiple agencies. And while we're not necessarily talking about in-town issues that are, I think, separate from the regional district areas throughout, and as Director Cote mentioned, yes, absolutely, it's province-wide, but we're just attempting to bring all parties involved together to further discussions on this matter. Thank you for that.
And Director Bodner, I believe. Oh, sorry, Terry, go ahead. I didn't see you there. And then we'll get to Director
Just a quick comment that we're happy to expand it, but the motion made by the directors on January 13th was specific to Area C illegal camping. So that was why the recommendation has it for Area C.
Okay. Director Bodner, please go ahead. I'm sorry if you can hear that. My dogs are going insane for some reason.
I too thought that was a lot of money for to be going to illegal camping, and it seems like it's like swatting a fly. You know, if you don't get it, it's going to land somewhere else anyway, to have to chase it down. And as far as the money coming to Cherry Creek, I have not. I'm certainly would be supportive of that. I have not had a chance to speak to Lucas yet regarding the budget yet for this year. Thank you.
Once again, muted. Okay, if there are any other comments, we do have the motion in front of us with actually an attached table. So this comes down to what the will of the board is. Director McNabb.
So, I mean, what I initially spoke about here was the disproportionate funding that's arrived out of our allocation of this COVID start money. Now, you know, Beaufort and Cherry Creek both we're short-sticked on this. I mean, it isn't a lot of money that's left, but they should be seeing benefits from it. I mean, what Beaver Creek got was, when you take 3,000 people, 3,000 people is Tofino. How much did Tofino get? Anybody know? Somebody might know. I mean, it's going to be more than $40,000. You know, so this money is supposed to go into regional areas to help with issues of that are specific to those areas, that the infusion of funds could either reduce taxation or implement projects that are going to create activity. And this is the wrong way to go. We looked at this whole thing the wrong way. When I spoke to Minister Osborne about it, about the whole program, that's what I said to her. I said, the ACRD didn't take that kind of approach looking at it, and we definitely should have. You know, to put $90,000 into Long Beach Airport was not the right way to go. It should have been distributed better than that, and it should have been beneficial to the areas. I mean, Cherry Creek is 1,800 people, you know, 1,800 taxpayers. That this money was set aside to help, and it didn't. And so, I mean, this end result portion of this needs to be more carefully considered by the board and directed at those areas that didn't receive benefit. Beaufort and Cherry Creek. That's my story. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Douglas, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to comment that the approach that we took was basically sort of a two-tiered or two-layered approach. First of all, we had to pay attention to what was the intention and I guess, quote unquote, legally allowed under the grant. And I think that the board will recall that we did have a discussion about sort of describing those things that was communicated to us over time as this was explained to us. And then the second thing we did was we focused on services and that which services were affected by COVID. And so that was the approach that we attempted to take. And so that's not speaking for or against a change of any kind, but just want to remind the board that that's what we followed it. We looked at what was allowed under the provisions of the program, and then followed the services that were affected by COVID the way we understood it, and then looked forward to how relief might be prepared on a service by service basis. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further comments or questions? Okay, once again, we do have a motion in front of us. However, it's based on what the board would like to do. Director Cote, please go ahead.
To move us along, I'll make the motion that the Committee of the Whole recommend the allocations of remaining COVID restart funds for inclusion by the Board of Directors in the 2021-2025 financial plan as follows.
And then the table. Yeah.
The table, but I'd really like to change it from illegal camping in Area C to illegal camping in the ACRD.
I think that makes sense. Is that amenable? I guess we'll have if you move that and somebody can second it.
I'll move that.
All right. Thank you, Director Roberts. Okay, with that in mind, that is the motion as presented. So in your copy, strike out Area C Long Beach and just put ACRD. Okay, one last call for comments. Seeing none. Oh, Director McNabb, please go ahead.
So I'd like to make an amendment to that motion that the $1,700 for regional parks be put towards community parks.
That would be 17,000.
Yeah, the 17,600. Yeah.
It's these bifocals, you know. I need big ones.
So that would be, instead of regional parks, you call it community parks?
Community parks. That way these other regional districts may be able to have some benefit from this.
Oh, like the other electoral areas.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for the amending motion? Going once. Thank you, Director Beckett. Okay. Any commentary on the amendment? Director Shannon, then Director Cote.
Thank you. I really appreciate Director McNabb bringing up the comments that he did. I just don't know, I mean, from Beaufort's standpoint, if changing it from regional to community is going to benefit Beaufort one way or another, just from that amendment, because I mean, there's the Long Train Trail that goes through Beaufort, which would be regional, as I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then we just have the community hall, unless the community hall benefits or could benefit from a community park. But otherwise, I don't believe that there is a community park in Beaufort, but thank you.
Okay. Whoa, you just moved. Okay, Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. I believe that regional parks is a strategic action that we need to discuss going forward. We have only a couple of regional parks, and that discussion needs to go on. That would include, in my opinion, the request for regional parks or community parks to become regional parks. And I'm sure that there is one in Beaver Creek that is in question. And I know that there's also the Great Central Lake boat launch that is in question, that should be turned into a regional park. And I'm sure that the city has also got some in mind. The Hole in the Wall, there's a number of regional parks. Personally, Sprout Lake has a flourishing parks commission, and we are not asking for any support from the regional district to support our local neighborhood parks. Thank you.
Okay, further comments on the amending motion? I have Director Bodnar. Was there anyone else? No? Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to clarify then that regional parks would take in the Log Train Trail. Is that correct?
Go ahead,
Okay.
Terry. You're muted though.
Sorry. Yes, Regional Parks has the Log Train Trail included as one of its parks. And that, I think, was the plan. I'd have to check with the Lands and Resources Coordinator, but when I told him that there might be some restart funding coming to that service, his initial thought was to spend it on the Log Train Trail.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have Dr. McNabb next. I'm going to ask you a question too. Would you rather this be an exclusive to community parks, or can we just add community parks to regional so that those kind of overlaps can be addressed? But go ahead.
Well, my focus is to try to put this into districts that are actually going to be able to directly benefit from it. So I might just add that Maplehurst Park is in Cherry Creek and definitely needs this kind of infusion in money in access. Right now it's accessed off of a road in Beaver Creek called Willow, and 15 cars get parked in front of 3 residences, and it's very problematic. But I'm just trying to put this somewhere where it diminishes the benefit of the whole and pinpoints it into areas that can actually be effective to those regional districts.
I think that I think
I mean,
that's,
albeit that might be a benefit offside to Beaver Creek too. So we'll talk about that. Yes, it is. Okay. That's why I want it.
okay. Dr. Minions, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say that, again, I think we are getting too focused in on some of the details on this. And I would just say that I see, an improvement to a park in Cherry Creek or an improvement to a park in Beaver Creek, Beaufort, as improvement to the entire Alberni Valley regardless. It doesn't matter if that park is in Beaver Creek or Cherry Creek. All of the parks benefit every single person in this valley. So I'm not supportive of a change in this motion. I think leaving it as regional makes sense. Again, I think that we maybe need to start thinking a bit more regionally and looking at this money is going to benefit the entire Alberni Valley.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that brings us to a point of making a decision. So the first thing we're going to do is the amending motion specifically on changing regional parks to community parks, and the understanding there is that it yeah.
I don't know if we could put regional and community parks on that. Would that be possible?
I think
motion?
Yeah, I think interpreting it as inclusive does actually address the concerns that Director Cote and Minions brought up.
Would my seconder be willing to do that? I think it was Director Beckett.
I believe it was. That's all good.
Okay, so we're good with that.
Director Holmes, go ahead. Or Mr. Holmes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'm just a question through the chair to our CFO, Terry Fong, about the implications of how does she prepare a budget with this motion? Does she have clear enough direction with that? Thank you.
Is there anything that...
So we have a meeting on the morning of March 10th. Sorry, March 10th, that we were going to discuss parks in general. So I'll get the Lands and Resources Coordinator to bring back possibly a plan for the 17,600 to present to the board for consideration. And then that will indicate what services I need to run the funding through for budget.
Okay.
So with that in mind, Terry, this motion will support that exercise then, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to thank everyone for this conversation. I know it feels like pulling teeth, but I think the issues that everyone has raised does put us in the direction of being more constructive as time goes by. So I'll put the amending motion to the test. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay. With that in mind, that brings us to the original motion now that has two changes. One that's amended, that has the motion stating that it's community and regional parks, and then the other change that was not really a change, but part of the original motion is the entire ACRD for the illegal camping issue. So unless there are any other comments on that, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Okay. Just being cognizant of the time, we do have 10 minutes to noon, but we only have a few more decisions here. That brings us to the grant and aid decision for the Music by the Sea program or group. I think this one's pretty straightforward.
I can speak to that,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Please, I didn't see you there, Terry, so please, yeah. Thank you for chiming in.
So this was deferred from our committee of the whole meeting where we discussed the grant and aid. So I reached out to the Music by the Sea organization and you can see their response. So just asking for the board to either approve or deny as they would like this application, and same with the next application as well.
Okay. Thank you. I have Directors Bodner and then Beckett and then McNabb.
Thank you. What I wanted to say, and I'm speaking from my experience, they're asking for $2,000. Port Alberni's, and that money is going to be going to the Victoria Hospital and for support and equipment. I get that. Apparently, according to consensus, that Port Alberni's 50% of our population is 55 and over. And with the experience that I have had in Victoria and having to count on them and depend on them for medical information regarding my husband. And the amount of time we were down there, thank God they were there. And I think that looking at this, we don't have to cross the pond to go for professionalism. It's in Victoria, and that is one of the best places in the world. They come from all over to do their practicum there, many of the doctors, and the care is absolutely excellent. So I would be very much in favor of this grant. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Beckett and then Director McNabb.
Thank you. You know, I did raise the issue of the fact that they did not have their function in Banfield last year, and what did it look like this year, and we made the decision to go back and ask them specifically what their plans were. You see the response back. I reviewed the video. I'm satisfied that their intent is to continue the venue in Banfield post-pandemic, that they're continuing to promote Banfield. And again, my glass half full. They'll return next summer, a year this summer. And in the meantime, I think it's important that we continue to provide them an opportunity to promote this venue and to promote Banfield. So I'm prepared to support it this year based on what I hope will be a return to our community next year.
Thank you, Director Beckett. That brings us to Director McNabb, and then I'll say something myself.
So the problem I have with this is that they're saying they're operating in the red, but they're giving $15,000 to the foundation. I don't know how that all fits mathematically, but what I would like to suggest is that if we commit to these funds, subject to them having the event in Banfield. You know, I mean, our hospital foundation could easily use $2,000, so we could forward that to have the emergency ward one step closer to being built, renovated. But I just, you know, we don't have a lot of money to be sort of philandering throughout the world. We need to be focused on what it's going to do for us. So that's my thinking on it.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to speak in favor of the Music by the Sea idea, mostly because I think this would be a good component to maintain if and when the Banfield Road improvements come into place. I'm not certain to what degree not supporting them will make or break them, but I do think that it would be beneficial to our part of the area to keep this going and keep those relationships up in such a way that it will be part of a cornerstone to help bring more people to the region and maybe turn left at Port Alberni instead of right. That's the idea, but at this point, I'm willing to entertain ideas at this stage. I see Director Cote. Is there anyone else who has anything? Okay, please go ahead, Director Cote.
Thank you. So through the chair, my understanding of Music by the Sea was to assist in the arts through music, presentations, and bringing musicians that wouldn't normally ever go to Banfield to Banfield and promote the arts. So it's wonderful that if they're actually able to make some money and make a donation to the Victoria Hospital is a wonderful thing that they could do. But originally it was the intent was to support Banfield and Anakla regarding promotion and having this world, renowned artists come there and support the arts. So I support it for that reason, not so much the fact that they're able to make contributions to Victoria Hospital. But that's a wonderful addition that they're providing. So I'm willing to support this. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So with that in mind, there's a choice in the motion for approve, deny for the recommendation. Are there any other comments that I may have missed? Seeing none. Director Beckett?
Happy to make the motion, sir, that the committee of the whole consider the Music by the Sea grant and aid application and approve or deny as desired to be included in the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District 2021-2025 financial plan.
Okay, I think we're making a recommendation, so I think we have to choose either approve or deny.
Let's go with approve.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, that brings us to the Alberni Valley Drag Race Association. So, Terry or Dr. McNabb, please go ahead.
So I would move that the committee of the whole consider the Alberni Valley Drag Race Association grant and aid application and approve it subject to the holding of a 2021 event in Alberni Valley.
Okay, so we'll just add that subject to right after financial plan.
Yeah.
And to hold it in 2021?
2022, sorry.
2022. Okay.
Well, yeah, no.
This year,
yeah,
right?
This
Yeah,
year,
this
yeah.
year. Okay,
No,
okay.
but,
Okay.
Here, this works better.
Okay.
Oh, I'm feeling good now.
Okay. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Director Minions. And then I have Director Roberts. Comment?
Just wondering if, as I recall, previously Director McNabb had to back away from making any recommendation on this unless he's got a drag car going in it this year.
I don't think I don't think you're involved anymore with the association.
No, I'm not. I don't belong to the association.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, with that in mind, are there any further comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, thank you for that. That brings us to reports. We have 3 sets of reports. It looks like it's an item. Oh, the application for the grant and aid is withdrawn. And would anyone like to pull anything out? Dr. McNabb, please go ahead.
Sir, sorry to prolong this, but the electoral administration portion of this, is this where we talk about the strategy of moving the reserves into strategic something or other?
Gary? Yeah, there you are. Hi.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so
So
go ahead.
I think she's caught up
Having
in.
problems?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's something wrong with her connection.
So I'd just like to speak about this. I mean, it's a philosophical principle with me that these reserves, our taxpayers across the board, where there were surpluses, paid for something that didn't happen. They were taxed on a service that wasn't provided. And I don't see these going into 5 years ahead or anything. I see them going into next year's budget to relieve taxation in that year. I get what the accounting system is trying to do, that they're kind of softening the blow of the montage of staff that we're going to put on and so forth. But it's an unrealistic vision now, and it's an unrealistic vision in the future. We should be taxing for the services we're providing, for the personnel that we're providing. We shouldn't be taxing in this year and last year for something that didn't happen. You know, the Sprout Lake Marine Patrol is exactly the same thing. If it didn't happen, why are we paying for it? So it should go into reserve for that service, whatever we require for this year. And if not, it should be peeled out and we look at it whenever to support it. I mean, it is a service. We're going to support it. We know what the cost is. It just changes the image. Looking in the mirror, it's kind of like going to the carnival and looking in the wacky mirrors. This is what that does, and I don't like it. I mean, we're asking for people's money. This surplus could go a long ways to reduce the cost of 2021 servicing, and that's exactly how I want it. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry, please go ahead.
That is definitely an option, but I just want to explain, and I think the graph does it fairly well to show what the impact of that decision will be. So in 2020, the requisition was approximately 80,000. Because of the surplus that was created in 2020, the requisition could actually drop down as far as $25,000 in 2021. But because we would then have to bring it back up not only to its regular level, but also conduct an election in 2022, the tax requisition will then jump to approximately $125,000. So there'll be a $100,000 jump in tax requisition from 2021 to 2022 just with this service if we don't try to stabilize with a reserve fund for this year. In this service's case, I'm only suggesting that we do it until 2022 to offset those additional election costs that are going to occur.
Okay, thank you, Director McNabb.
So what this is missing is that we're still in COVID. We're still talking on Zoom. We're going to be talking on Zoom till we wear out a couple more computers. So we're budgeting the same as we did last year for this year. We're going to have surpluses for 2022. It's not considering that. And, you know, that's the reality of our next 8 or 10 months, is that we're going to spend less than we're actually taxing for.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just respond to that.
Go ahead.
We have made the assumption that UBCM will proceed in some form because they have not officially canceled it yet. We did reduce substantially the amount that we had set aside for AVICC because they have already determined at this point in time. So we could reduce the tax requisition by reducing the amount that we anticipate to spend on those conventions, but still use a rate stabilization. So that would still drop the tax requisition slightly, but also provide us that extra funding for next year to offset those costs. Staff are happy to come back with an option for that, but we discussed that from a staff level and recognize that UBCM and AVICC are both coming out with different types of programming this year, and not all of that is free. So there will be some costs, even if it is virtual, associated with attending these types of conferences. So we wanted to leave some funding in there. But for the UBCM convention, we have left $27,000 in the budget, and we only spent about $7,000 of that in 2020. So we could reduce that down by $10,000 or $15,000 and probably still have enough room for the electoral area directors to attend what UBCM puts on.
Okay. So thank you for that. I think the next step now is to maybe have that conversation substantively in the future. I think the next step is actually just to receive the reports and then move into the in-camera portion. Would anyone like to move that? Thank you, Director Shannon. And seconded by Director Cote. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so before we go into the in-camera portion of the Committee of the Whole, and I believe the materials were sent out, I can't remember what date it was sent out. It was sent out on Monday, 4:04 p.m. in your email, so you should be able to find it. It's from Janice.